So we kind of came up with the idea, well, we've now got experience of solar, we know how to install it, we understand the model of how it generates, how it works. And so the Solar for Business scheme kind of came about by going, okay, if we invest, we own it, the business doesn't have to invest any money, but they can get financial benefits and the environmental benefits from it. And that's where this evolved from. And last year, the last financial year was our most successful in terms of new installations. We installed 1.3 megawatts of new installation on roofs last year, and we hope this year will be another record-breaking years in terms of installation. We generate more electricity as an organisation than we consume, so we're all this solar farm energy, and we're now able to bring partner organisations on as both generators but primarily as consumers, so they can consume locally generated electricity which is being generated within our patch. And it's working, it's developed, and we've just started on this journey of using a peer-to-peer network for our own estate.
Hello and welcome to Ideas That Happen, where we interview innovators and practitioners turning ideas for the public good into reality. Today, I'm joined by Andy Oswald. He is the Energy and Environment Strategy Manager for West Suffolk Council in the east of England. Now, energy strategy managers like Andy have a lot of work ahead of them in the next 5 to 10 years. So, for example, West Suffolk Council is a local authority that in 2019 declared climate emergency and has targets for 2030, which are quite ambitious. I'll let Andy talk us through those a little bit. I wondered if you could give me a sense of your time working in energy and energy strategy. How have things changed for a local authority as they think about energy? Are you approaching it in the same way you were when you first started in this job, or have you seen quite fundamental shifts in how a local authority approaches energy management?
It's certainly evolved and developed over time. I think when I first started, I've been within the organisation for 16 years, so I've seen it evolve and change over the time. And I guess to begin with, you thought of gas and electricity as something you just purchase from the grid from a supplier, and you sort of go to the market and you'd say, okay, who can offer me the cheapest unit rate for the electricity and the gas for the next 12 months or 24-month period? And that was the role of the procurement of your utility services. But that, like I say, that was just one element of it, and that element has changed now. But that was the focus. Cheapest. What could we get, and then move it on from there. Obviously, customer services and all the rest of it played into it. But I think the unit rate was always the key driver. But we started looking at energy management seriously as an organisation in 2005, and our journey started becoming sort of accredited to the ISO 14001 management system. So the authority achieve that status, and then that gives you that kind of formalized process for looking at your impacts across your organization. So everything from your waste to your energy, your transportation, how much paper you're buying, and that gave us that formal methodical approach to dealing with how we look at energy and the wider impacts we have as an organisation. And then that's kind of developed. So from energy management, that was a key to developing the energy management. And then, over the last 10 years, the push for renewables has probably been the biggest focus, and how that has played into us as an organisation and other organisations as well, both in terms of when the government has incentivised the uptake of renewables, and we've taken full advantage of that. And that translates into then there's different options for tariffs in terms of where you're purchasing your electricity from. And that's where we really got going as an organisation, and some of the schemes that we're going to touch on later in this interview.
Yeah. And the most recent iteration of this journey for you, I guess, has been the net zero goal, which is, in terms of ambition, has that been a kind of step change for you in terms of quite how much you have to think about, and also, I suppose, to some extent, the speed? Maybe you could give us an idea of what it is that West Suffolk has committed to, and how has that changed your approach to energy management?
Yes, so the 2019 declaration followed some other key policy initiatives we started back in 2015. First of all, we developed the Community Energy Plan, which was looking at how we can better utilize energy in an organization. And that gave us some financial starting point. We committed money to looking at community energy and the energy transition back in 2015. That evolved into, we had an energy framework, which is how we're looking to buy, sell, and use the energy locally. And then that was just focused on the energy. And then the climate declaration in 2019 really did stimulate us in terms of, it gave us I think a lot of organisations a lot more political support for what we were looking to do. So we had political support and the leadership, senior leadership support, saying, okay, we're declaring this climate emergency. And it wasn't just a case of declaring it and then just saying we've declared it. We're then like, okay, we need to action this. How are we going to do it? And we went about it by setting up a joint work group between both officer-led and our political membership. So we had we call it a task force, and that task force was to look at what are our impacts as an organisation on climate change, and where do we need to focus. So we set up a series of themes, and the themes, for example, we have a housing theme, we have a transport theme, we have an energy theme, we have a biodiversity theme. And so and looking at our buildings for an estates theme and our building management. So we set up a series of working groups, and the biggest and the most important thing that came out of that was to put a funding allocation towards it. So we had a £9 million net zero fund was established as an organisation, and that funding allows us to develop the projects and the work that we're doing. There's certain caveats to it. It needs to show a firm sort of return on the investment. So what we're looking to do is blend some of the more sort of profitable initiatives. So if you're reducing energy usage in a building, you're saving money, and in some of obviously they all have different rates of return. So what we're looking to do is do some of the ones that have a good rate of return that can hopefully offset the cost of the trickier schemes. And I think what we're looking to do, and that's why I said earlier, we're doing the buildings first, because you can derive pretty good financial savings from generating solar PV electricity, for example. You make that investment, it has a payback period, and you can use those savings to then finance some of probably the more costly initiatives, which are going to potentially be buying electric vehicles or buying maybe other fuels, hydrogen fuels in the future. So buying those assets do not have such a financial return, but we're trying to use this £9 million to blend returns on what we're looking to do in terms of driving environmental change, but through a way that financially we can support it and use those savings to sort of bankroll some of the other investments we need to make. But the political and leadership support was the key. Then that's what was driven by that 2019 climate emergency. It really focused the attention on what we need to do and how we're going to do it. And we set up a carbon budget there. So we had our carbon emissions in 2019, and we've graphed that to show, what that trajectory needs to be, that downward trajectory needs to be for 2030. And, each year, so we're just doing our carbon reporting for the last financial year. And, are we on target? Or if we're not, we haven't quite got the results yet. But the previous years, we've always been hitting our targets, but we know it's going to get more difficult as you do the sort of the easier wins first, and getting down towards the back end of the programme is going to be where the real challenges come, both in terms of technology and financial support to deliver those.
Yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned this financing challenge, because obviously something that all energy managers have to face with is this a really large expense, right? When you're changing millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of pounds or euros worth of energy flows through an area, there's a great expense attached. So it's interesting you've mentioned this idea of trying to build return on investment through your schemes and your initiatives, right? Talk to me a little bit about that, about how you try and calculate and balance these programs against each other in a way that makes sure that you can return your investment.
Yeah, so the key way we've developed to compare one project against another is on a cost of carbon, a ton of carbon saved. So that's our basic kind of equation that we use. So we'll assess a project, and that way you can kind of compare one project to another. So we'll work out what it's going to cost, how many, what are the savings going to be, and that will give us pounds per ton of carbon saved. How much is that going to cost to save that ton of carbon? So you can then, the projects we're trying to develop are the ones that have saved the most amount of carbon for the smallest amount of money, really, because then it makes sure we can do more work. So that's our basic rationale. Like I said earlier, we're aware that not all of the projects are going to have a high rate of return, so we need to make sure we do some of those as well. But like all of us, you can do the easier ones first. If they have a higher rate of return, it's an easier sell to your through your sign off processes, and then hopefully that builds up that you can then show that it does work, it's developing, and you can then do more of the tricky projects later on.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about this. So it's interesting, you're currently on the easy wins. I mean, things like building efficiency, the business model is pretty clear, the financials are pretty clear. But as you move into new areas, perhaps there'll be the need for new business models or new, simple, efficient models to get more renewable production and more renewable consumption. And this is actually where we met. We met in a European consortium that was trying to help local authorities take the lead on the local energy transition. And one of the projects that West Suffolk was working on was a peer-to-peer energy network, where renewable energy would be fed in, and then that energy would find a home, a kind of profitable home, I guess. Those electrons would go where they're needed most. Tell us a bit about this peer-to-peer energy networks. It's one of the first that I was aware of, I believe in the UK, a partnership between a council and a peer-to-peer network. Tell us about how that started and what the rationale behind it was.
Yeah, okay, sure. So it all began back in 2015. We developed our own solar farm. So we're the owners of a 12 megawatt solar farm located within our district. And as soon as I've been responsible for looking after that solar farm and selling that electricity. So up until recently, we've just been selling that on an annual basis through a power purchase agreement. But we always had the ambition to be able to want to use that energy to power our own estate. And it would never be through a wire. We couldn't have a direct wire just due to the location of the solar farm and the disparate nature of our buildings and where we're paying paying for the electricity. So we were looking for models that would support that. And early on, it was called sleeving, seemed to be the model, but that was always involved in using them. We're still having to go into the main grid, and you were still incurring a lot of those sort of grid network charges. And it seemed like there must be a better way of being able to utilise the solar farm energy that we have, and to say that we're utilising that power to fund to power our buildings. So the Access project, that like you say, Benedict, that's where we met. Our rationale for that project was looking to build a peer-to-peer energy network on a standalone industrial estate in Mildenhall in West Suffolk, and to see if we could use. We owned solar PV assets on roofs in that locality, and we knew there were other businesses with solar. And the initial remit was to see if we could use some of the energy that was getting exported into the grid, whether we could use that locally to sell it to other neighbouring businesses, not through a direct wire, but through a peer-to-peer network. And that's where our thinking came on this, and that's where we started to look at this further. And through the Access project, we used the Knowledge Transfer Network, which is a national scheme trying to bring innovators and different parties together. So we set a challenge through this Knowledge Transfer Network to say, this is what we're looking to do. We're looking for a peer-to-peer platform, explained what we had and where it was set up, and we identified an organisation called Urban Chain through that approach, and they were in exactly the place where we were wanting to be, where they developed a peer-to-peer platform, and that's where the journey began. And we that was back in 2021 where we were introduced to Urban Chain, and we followed working through them for the last 2 years of seeing how this could work. And it's finished, or it's as of the 1st of April 2023, so we're in the second month now. We're now purchasing our electricity from the Urban Chain peer-to-peer network, and our solar farm, as well as some roof-mounted exported solar, is feeding into that peer-to-peer network, and then we're purchasing our electricity from it. What the great thing about it is that we generate more electricity as an organisation than we consume. So we're all this solar farm energy, and we're now able to bring partner organisations on as both generators, but primarily as consumers, so they can consume locally generated electricity, which is being generated within our patch. And it's working, it's developed, and we've just started on this journey of using a peer-to-peer network for our own estate, which is it's great. It's a great result of the Access projects. And we didn't really, we were looking at it from a business point of view to begin with, but then we realised actually this could work for us and achieve our long-term goal of utilising our own solar farm energy for our estate, and that's where we are as of today.
And what strikes me as clever about this is a way to use software to match your local production with your local consumption without having to worry about all the barriers of the grid capacity, for example, the more physical barriers. And do you see a role for kind of these software solutions or kind of workarounds to some degree in helping you tackle some of those less easy wins?
Absolutely, and I think the electricity industry is recognizing that more generally. I think we're looking at it, and it's going to develop into these time of use tariffs, and it's all part of that development, isn't it? It's using the electricity in a smarter way. So what you alluded to there is matching our consumption or our generation and our consumption, and if the peer-to-peer platform recognises it's brought on more generators, it can then take on more consumers. There's certainly demand from the consumer side to sign up to this. It's given flexibility. It can generate financial savings for organisations because it's a cheaper way to purchase electricity. It's a bottom line, and that's probably going to attract people to this market. But also, it's 100% renewable and it's local energy. So the platform has the key central role in this. They need to be matching generation and consumers and bringing on. Obviously, the downside of solar is it is very cyclical and very reliant on the sunshine. So they need to make sure they have some generation for nighttime and winter usage. So they have brought on a range of generating assets, including wind and hydro, into their mix so that they can offer a reliable source of electricity through a reliable source of renewable electricity into their mix. But I think what we've been able to the scheme to do is, I think, as a local authority signing up to it, hopefully it will give other organisations the confidence to go with it, because it's quite a leap of faith. It's a new way of trading and purchasing electricity, and hopefully as other organisations come onto it, then it gains credibility, and people are prepared to give it an opportunity to grow, and that's certainly what we're hoping we can facilitate through signing up to this.
I wanted to move on a bit, because it's interesting that you say West Suffolk generates more than it consumes, and I think part of that is due to the way that you've been encouraging generation and incentivizing generation. One of the things I wanted you to tell us a bit about is Solar for Business, which is a scheme that you run in West Suffolk that enables businesses to access solar power put on their roofs. Could you tell us a bit about how you had the idea for Solar for Business, or how the idea came about, and why is it a good idea?
Yeah, sure. So the West Suffolk Solar for Business scheme is a scheme that we started in 2016. Its journey started earlier than that. So when the feed-in tariffs first were launched in the UK in early 2011, 2012, we saw that the incentives were there, and we took advantage of those and started installing solar PV on our own buildings, so on our offices, our depots, our leisure centres, and put solar on, watched it for a couple of years and realised it worked, it was good, it was saving electricity, we were generating a return, and everyone was very pleased with how it was operating. So we also have a role, we go out and we talk to residents, we talk to businesses on all manner of sort of environmental issues. So when we were speaking to businesses, we'd try and, say, have you thought about putting solar panels on your roof? They're a great way of saving energy. And we'd often hear the same response. It would often be, we'd love to, but, and the but was, we haven't got the capital to be able to invest in the solar. At the time, it was even more of a financial outlay than it is now. and it was expensive. And business was saying, if we did have money, or we do have money, we'd use it to reinvest in core pieces of machinery or in reinvestment into our business, or simply we haven't got the money and we're not prepared to borrow money. So that kind of got us thinking about what could we do to facilitate that. And it was happening at the same time. There was quite a lot of change in the way local authorities were financed in the UK, and we were being tasked with trying to generate new sources of revenue and becoming more commercial. And so it was all happening at the same time. So we kind of came up with the idea, well, we've now got experience of solar. We know how to install it. We understand the model of how it generates, how it works. And so the Solar for Business scheme kind of came about by going, okay, if we invest, we own it. The business doesn't have to invest any money, but they can get financial benefits and the environmental benefits from it. And that's where this evolved from. So we went to a company, or we approached a couple of companies that we were familiar with, and we'd done other project work, environmental project work with, and sort of tested the idea that we were trying to devise, and they liked it, thought it would work. And we did our first installation early in 2016. It's a printing company in Bury St Edmunds. We invested in 100 kilowatt solar PV on their roof. And how it works is we fund it, we own it, and we maintain it over a 25-year lease period. And we sell the power to that business through a power purchase agreement, which has an agreed rate of electricity, a sale rate on that first year. And then that's linked to an inflationary consumer price index for the next 25 years. So the business gets certainty over the electricity rate. They get the energy at a lower rate than their tariff rate. We're guaranteed to be lower than their tariff rate, and they can claim the carbon benefits and the reputational benefits to their customers in terms of generating renewable on-site electricity. And from what we get out of it, we're supporting our local businesses, we're helping them reduce their energy costs, and we're generating a return on our investment through an environmental energy initiative. So it had multiple benefits to it. And following that first installation in 2016, we now have 74 installs under this scheme, with over 5 megawatts of generated capacity. So and last year, the last financial year was our most successful in terms of new installations. We installed 1.3 megawatts of new installation on roofs last year, and we hope this year will be another record-breaking years in terms of installation totals going up. So we're committed to doing this. We have I referenced our £9 million net zero fund, so that is now being used to fund this, and that the returns on that are how we can fund other works within what we're looking to do in an organisation. So it's kind of trying to make the finances work. But the Solar for Business scheme has been successful. It's delivering what we said it was going to do, and it's also helped those businesses. In the energy crisis of the last 18 months, 2 years, it really, those that have been signed up to it have really made a massive saving compared to where some of their new contracted rates are. So probably at the beginning, one of the hardest things, the financial benefits or the savings to the business weren't huge, so it needed to be sold also on the environmental. But now, the financial benefits, current electricity rates are really, really quite powerful in terms of making businesses make that decision as to why would they want to invest into this scheme.
Absolutely. It's an amazing story, starting with one small roof and going to 74 businesses in a year. Something that strikes me with both of these models is that they're simple and they're scalable. So it's easy once you've proven it works once or twice, then it kind of snowballs and you can scale the model very easily. Was this something you designed for? Did you design for scalability? And do you think having scalable models is going to be important going forward?
Obviously, scalable models are great, aren't they? Because once you put the work in and the time into setting them up, if you can make them grow. And I think when we started it, we were like, it was all trying to prove the concept works. And we had, after doing the initial, probably did 5 or 10 installs early on when the feed-in tariff was still available. And then when the feed-in tariff was removed because the government felt that, renewables or solar no longer needed the subsidy, we'd seen a big drop in the installation rates. We did sort of take breath for a little while and think, is the model still going to work? Or is it now, does it stack up? We probably had 2018-19 was a slow period where we're just trying to assess and see where the market was in terms of where solar was going. Fortunately, panel prices and the whole point of incentivizing the market was to bring down the price of installation and making the price of the panels cheaper, and that's worked globally. We've seen a big drop. I think I'm right in saying that in the last 10 years the price of an installation has dropped by about 65% from where we were 10 years ago. So the market's responded, and so some of it is you obviously design these things hoping they've got longevity and scalability, but some of it's outside of your control. But we're fortunate that it needs to stack up financially for organisations like us to do this, and it does. And but it has varied over the years. But I'm pretty certain now the costs, with the cost of electricity and the cost of installation, this is a model that will continue to work. I've spoken to a lot of other organisations, many local authorities that have heard about what we're doing, and we're trying to share. We're happy to share our learnings, sharing documents. I've presented to quite a few organisations in the public sector about how we're doing it, and it sort of encourage them to try and take this up. And some are now progressing with it. So we're not alone in doing this. There's other sort of people that have been doing it, but new players are coming on board as well. It really it does work. One thing the public sector can do, we're happy to sign into 25-year leases. We as individuals might not be here doing this role in 25 years' time, but a local authority as an organisation will be here, and hopefully we have that trust and longevity as an organisation that people can kind of buy into and realise that they're working with a trusted partner. And I think that's probably been one of the reasons for the success of the project is the nature of who we are as an organisation and how they're more comfortable entering into a long-term arrangement with us.
Yeah, that's great. Let's finish a little bit with what you do advise other organisations and other local authorities. If there is a local authority energy manager watching this video and hearing about what you've been up to in West Suffolk, what advice would you have for them as they consider developing their own business models or their own new strategies to increase renewable consumption and generation?
Yeah, I think the main thing is trying to see what other people are doing. There's certainly a lot to be learned from other people, isn't there? Seeing whether it's not everything works. We've also tried sort of to do this through the renewable heat incentive and through heat contracts, and that seems to be a bit more it's been more complicated. And so I think learning from others is a great thing. See what's worked and what hasn't worked. Not saying don't try. It might work with one. It might not have worked with us, but it could work with other organisations. But certainly learning from others and seeing what else is out there, which is the great thing about sort of some of the funded projects that are out there, where different partners are coming together and you can learn from each other. And once you've established what you want to do, it's kind of making I think it's very important to build up trust and within your organisation. So start with a project you think is going to work, and if you get the trust and the buy-in that you've done it once, you can then probably try more. Something a bit more. I don't know the word risky, but something a bit that hadn't been done before. Maybe a bit more trailblazer. Some of the newer stuff, but it's because you've got some credibility and trust with what you've done so far. So it's sort of start small, start with something that you think can work, and then build from there. But a lot of this, there are other people out. We're not alone in this. Sometimes you think, are we alone? But there's a lot of active networks in terms of both in the public sector and the public sector, in the private sector, what people are doing. So it's getting out there, networking a bit, and seeing what can be done, and then building up partners with people that can help you deliver this. And so, working with there's a lot of organisations out there that are all trying to operate in this space, and it's finding those partners who can support you with the development of any of your schemes.
Yeah, it's great advice. We'll leave in the description some links to everything that's going on in West Suffolk, but also some of these networks we're talking about and the resources. We've certainly found the same thing as well. We work with cities across Europe. That the kind of peer learning element of it is really important to growing and succeeding. In a sense, if you become a network, then you all learn from each other, and you're all iterating towards the process because we have very similar goals. That's great. We'll finish there. I want to ask probably the most important question of the interview, which is if the people watching happen to find themselves in West Suffolk, what do you recommend they do? What should they see?
From an energy point of view, or as a tourist?
No, let's go for a tourist point of view. We've done enough energy. What would you suggest people go and see on their day off?
Well, Bury St Edmunds is one of our main towns. It's a very historic town. It's got some lovely architecture and some good shopping. It's becoming a bit of a food hub as well. So Bury St Edmunds is well worth a visit. We've got the National Home of Horse Racing Museum in Newmarket with a large horse racing industry on the flats of the Newmarket racetrack. We've got the American jets flying around. We've got 2 American air bases, so that any plane spotters, there's some great photo images of jets and transporters up in the north of the district, and some wonderful countryside as well. So some nice countryside with walks, village pubs, and nice little villages to explore. So that's my bit for West Suffolk tourism.
Sounds great. The tourism board will be excited. So foodies, plane spotters, and hikers will have a good time. But it's great. Thank you very much for your time, Andy. Much appreciated. As I say, we'll leave links in the description so you can learn more about West Suffolk. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time for more Ideas to Happen.